This is the Men Refined podcast.
Hey friends, welcome to the Men Refined podcast. Today, in this episode, we have a good friend of mine, a mentor, a pastor, Mr. John Churchill is joining the podcast today. John is from Miami. He served in the United States Army for 22 years. Thank you for your service, sir. He was a church planter, a pastor of Bay Community Church. That's our home church. He was extensively being trained in church planters. Currently, he's a current pastor of missions at Christ Journey Church in Miami, Florida also. He has 3 children and 10 grandchildren. He loves investing in church leaders, and he has one wife for nearly 40 years, Susan.
Yeah.
Welcome, John. How are you, sir?
Thank you. I'm great. Thank you. It's been such a blessing to get to hear about my 10 grandkids and my wife for 40 years. It's one of those things that just make you say, okay, Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity to invest really also in the next generation, not just other leaders, but your kids and grandkids. So blessing.
And yeah, I'm thinking about the legacy that you're leaving behind, right? All 3 of your children are all married, and they all have their own family, and
they're all following Jesus.
Yes, amen. And they're all scattered, around the earth too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, what a blessing that is to be in that stage of life and see the fruits of your labor through the years.
Yeah.
You definitely have been an inspiration for my wife and I, in raising children and thinking about legacy every step of the way. So we definitely appreciate you very well, sir.
Thank you so much. Same here.
So talk to me about being a dad of 3 young kids.
Okay.
Where were you at the time? What was that journey look like? And I'm talking about what was in your head back then. Obviously not easy. You were traveling and you were serving our country, etc. Right. So that's a totally different dynamic.
Right.
But you made it, right?
We did.
So tell us a little bit about that journey back then. What did it look for you back then, and how do we see families interacting with our kids nowadays?
Yeah.
I mean, you have first role in that. You're still working at a church, and you still see all that happening with your peers around you.
Right. Yeah, I think when I look back, certainly the early years with kids is it's in many respects the most work physically. I even remember when between my second and third child. My second was my son, and then the third was another daughter, Carolyn, that I turned 30 in between those 2. And I could really feel the difference with the third, just the physical nature of it all, because you got to change diaper up all night, that kind of stuff. So, I could really see the difference. I was in the Army, so I was probably not as readily available to help my wife as most. I would have to leave often and be gone. And so she essentially, when our kids were little, she's the one that did most of the raising. I would come in and, the unfortunate thing with the military is when you do that, when you come back home, you're left with all the disciplinary things that as a man that needs to happen. And so I had to do a lot of that, which made it a little bit harder for the family.
Police, you're bad police, right?
Yeah, she was a really good police, but sometimes things didn't go the way that they were supposed to, and so they just needed a little bit of guidance, a little bit of correction on their course. And so we started. I've been a believer since I was 16, and my wife too has been a believer many years, and so we really started early, praying for our kids, praying for their growth, praying for their future spouses, all those things, even while they were in the womb. And so the Lord just really blessed that. I think that He cared for it. I think the way I looked at parenting, and I still look at it the same way, is that a parent's priority is to gradually transfer a child from dependence on the parents until their dependence rests solely on God.
Amen.
That's kind of the whole process. Early on, obviously, when a kid's young, they depend on parents for everything, and then they get a little bit older, and actually, where your kids are now, they depend on their friends, they depend on themselves. But what we want to do is eventually teach them to depend on God, and I think the way we do that is, and it's maybe more than what you were asking, but I think we really have to, as parent, we have to make sure that we love God first, and that with all our heart, and that all is included. We really serve God, we love Him, and we're going to do everything for Him, because I think that's kind of the foundation. We can't teach our kids to do that unless they see it in us. And
and being an example, right? I think is so important.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in the church, as you know. Became a believer under your teaching. But we had a great opportunity to have all three of our kids to grow up in the church. I didn't have that. Yadi didn't have that. So we didn't know. We didn't know how was that journey, right? We had great people surrounding us. We had a great tribe, a great community in the church, right? That help us through that process. You help us through that process, through community and relationships and investing in us. I mean, it's a journey that sometimes, I think many men need right now to stay connected, to surround yourself with godly people that can help you and shape you through the journey, because I don't think we have this figured out. I still do not have it figured out. And back then, man, I was just a knucklehead. I definitely was a knucklehead, and I was trying to learn something that I have no idea what I was doing, and figuring it out. And I think that journey is beautiful, and it's challenging.
Yeah.
But trusting God and making yourself available, I think, is a huge part of this journey as we get to be parents and do the best that we can through God's grace in it. It's just one of those things that, I see it now. I'm 45 now, and I'm seeing such an importance of that, of being in community, of wanting it to be close to those who love God with all their heart, and trying to imitate the good, right, and polish the bad and get rid of it eventually. Community, I think, for us had played a huge aspect in how we are raising our kids, right?
And I think not only just the community part, but the physical act of the kids having to go to church, and that they realize that is that's a normal
Serving.
part of life. I think that's it's key. I know the statistics are that kids who become active Christ followers as adults, if mom and dad went to church, 72% of those kids will follow Jesus. If only mom went, 15% of those kids as adults. If dad only went, 55% of the kids will follow Jesus as adult. And if neither mom or dad went, which sounds like that's what you were talking about, it's 0.06%. So it is so crucial. I mean, for us, it was really non-negotiable. They did not get a chance to say no.
There's no chance.
Yeah, I know that a lot of parents nowadays are, I don't know, and I see it happen even in the church I'm in now. I see, they become their lives revolve around their children rather than revolving around God. So when a summer league for softball or baseball or soccer, they're gone, and the parents are gone, and I think that speaks volumes to the kids
of what they care to, right? What is it that this family is valuing, right? People always, and we still interact with families that have young kids and stuff like that, and we provide a little bit of advice here and then, and we always say kids don't have a say in our home.
Right.
They just don't know what it is to think about, okay, what are we doing on Sunday? They just don't,
Right.
because they grow up, the only thing that they know what to do on Sundays is go to
Go to
church.
church. Yeah, because you're setting the standard. That's the standard.
That's it. That's what you grow up in, right? I have a party. A friend is doing a party. Okay, at what time is it? Oh, it's at 11. I say, okay, we're still at church serving, so
Yeah.
you can show up after church,
Right.
right? And we started serving in the church. Like, we serve, we
Yeah.
pull up chairs, we did the hard work, the labor. We
Yeah.
serve. Our kids
Absolutely.
served with us.
Yeah.
Now they all serving in the church. Nia serving in the high school ministry, in the middle school
beautiful.
ministry. Valentina loves to serve also in the middle school and with the babies on Sundays. So my kids, so far they're still serving in the church because that's all they know.
Yeah.
And sometimes they may ask, oh, but I have to go to church, I got so much homework. And I said, well, yeah, you didn't do it on Friday, you didn't do it on Saturday. Yeah, that doesn't mean that you're not going to come. But
Right.
it's very, very subtle, right?
Yeah.
Very subtle. But those little subtle things,
Yeah.
they still need to be in check.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they're human beings, they're sinful just like we are. Yeah, man, it's just, you see the difference between parents back then, something interesting in your stats. You mentioned that if dads go to church, okay, there's a higher percentage of kids that will end up going to church also.
Yeah. That'll become Christ followers, right?
That
Active.
tells you that the virtue of the dad in the home is so important
Yeah.
for the overall health of the family, for that legacy, the huge part that men play in the
Absolutely.
family is mind blowing.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
there's
those
been
stats.
such a big critic, culturally and socially, about trying to remove that patriarchy of a dad,
Yeah.
and
It really is.
some people don't even like to hear the word patriarchy because they think is abusive, but in reality, patriarchy is God's order onto
It is.
life,
It
onto
is.
us. That's all it is. It's
Yeah.
an order that we need to follow as Christ followers. I don't know. Talk about the importance of dads being present in their family, right? The stats say, just explain that. If the
Yeah.
dad shows up, if the dads come to church, it's a high probability that your kids will come back
Yeah.
to church or will stay in church.
Yeah. Right.
The dad's higher than the mom. Why would you think that would be?
I think to me, when I look at masculinity and the male in the home, the father, I really see the father as the standard keeper, the one that sets here's what we're going to do, and I want to make sure it happens. So here's how you're going to behave, and here's what we're going to do. The mom, and I'll tell you a little bit about my view of women in a minute, but a mom she's nurturing, she's caring, and sometimes because of that relationship that's natural, that comes from the moment that they're pregnant,
Absolutely.
they sometimes, I guess, the relationship is so close, so intimate with them that sometimes they can't hear the standards from the mom. Sometimes, and obviously that makes it tough. But just in case there's a woman listening right now, and especially if you're a single woman, God still is going to use you. He still needs you. Your job is a little harder. Well, probably a lot harder. But God will use you. I've always, and I just want to make it clear up front, I've always believed that the woman is the pinnacle of God's creation. The woman was the last thing created. And so she was all those things that God knew and built. The woman was the maximum. So I have an incredible view, a great view of women. I thank God for women. But there is a role for the man has to play. And if he doesn't, just like you said, the stats show that it impacts the kids. If the dad didn't go to church, then a lot of kids aren't going to follow. So I think, again, the man sets the standard in the home for that kind of thing, for development, for its rules, for direction. And so the ideal is that both man and woman go to church, and then you see the results. All our kids go to church now. They're all adults. They all have children, and it's habit for them. It's regular for them. And so you were talking about how important community is, but they get exposed then to community because it's natural. It's the way that they've always experienced it. So it's a good thing. And I think of my kids, my teens, when they were teens, they helped plant Bay Community Church. They were actively involved. I remember us walking through neighborhoods and talking to people, and they were right there. So, it really did make a difference in their life to be connected to the church.
It's in your blood. It gets to be in your blood, the necessity of serving in any capacity that you're able to at any given point. Because from that love of bringing us into the family of God, it's gotta come, that necessity. It's gotta come from you, from your heart, that necessity of giving yourself, of being selfless and giving yourself to the work of the kingdom. And I think you have to teach that, because I don't think that's going to come naturally from men.
Right, and you teach it by what you do.
You have to teach that. You have to be an example of that. I can only speak of what I've been through, what I've seen in other men, what I've seen in my life happen. If you don't have people that can be an example, that can tell you, you gotta do this, you gotta behave this way, the why you're doing this, many will not get it. I mean, the Bible says that we are saved by the word of God, by the preaching of his word. So somebody needs to tell us. Somebody needs to come to us, get closer to us, and speak the truth. Tell us about that gospel, about that Jesus, that man, 100% man, 100% God, that died for our sins. If we don't hear that, if we don't hear the why, I think it's very, very difficult for any man, if you haven't had that opportunity to have other people that you can look up to, that you can stretch yourself, right? And grow, also have the opportunity to grow on your own. It's difficult. It's a challenging way of living, even raising a family, because what if you never been a Christian? You don't have those values. You don't know, it's like that old saying, you don't know what you don't know, right? And sometimes it could be excusable, and sometimes could be laziness at the same time. But man, if you're seeing thunder around you, don't you want to just look up the window and see what's going on?
Right.
And I think there's a lack of self-awareness in the world right now, especially with men. We're not self-aware because we don't want to deal with drama. One, we don't want to be self-aware because, okay, yeah, that happened. I don't want to deal with it. Put it in the back burner. I'll deal with it later. I don't have a brain to deal with that right now. Right now, you're aware of what happened, but you don't want to deal with it, so you can fix it because you don't want to deal with the drama. Right. So I think they're escaping that challenge discussion, healthy discussion, and dealing with that issue so we can learn from it and get better at it. They're just escaping. It's just escaping. Yeah. They just don't want to face the music.
Well, I think a lot of that is cultural. I think that when I look at our culture, I see that the main thing that I see happening to men is that they're just emasculated. You've had it from the 60s on forward. You have, the man's not really needed. A woman can do it all on her own, and a woman can. But what's better is if the man is there helping raise the child, because they end up, just like we've talked about the stats, they end up much better if that happens. So I think culture has really lessened and cheapened the role of the man in the home. And as a Christ follower, we're called to be countercultural. We've got to be different than that. And so the man really needs to be involved and not as a wimp. My wife's controlling me. No, not at all. You're really there to serve one another. I love the picture of the husband and wife, where the husband lifts up the wife and then she lifts him up, and you just keep growing up. And so the man's got to be there. He's got to be part of that. He's integral. If he's not there, there's an impact in the family. And so I encourage the men that are listening to the podcast, get involved in your home, be there for them, show them your love, show them you want the best for them. Invest in them so that their dependence goes from depending on you to eventually depending on God. And so, but to do that, you have to show them how to do that.
When I was younger, probably, I don't know, in my teen years, I'm from Venezuela, so I was in Venezuela at that time. We used to watch a lot of sitcom shows from the States. A big one that just came to my mind was Married with Children. You see how they picture the dad as a guy who is a zero on the left, pretty much in the equation, comes from home. Everybody makes fun of him. He just sits in the couch, watch TV, and everybody rules the house in everything. And he is just a mockery. I mean, everybody just mock him. And we used to laugh at that because that's against our culture back then. For Hispanics, that's you mock that. You were mocking Americans like, look at this dude who has the pants, right? Can you expand a little bit on the roles, right? When you say come alongside your wife, help her, encourage her. What does that look for you? Because it's important to say also that there's a huge saying, lately in society right now. We're in 2022, right? Elon just purchased Twitter, so a lot of people are just crying. That's the season that we're in right now because he wanted to make it like a free speech kind of platform. So that's a big deal, I guess, now these days. But would you elaborate a little bit on what does that mean, be part of and be present with your wife at home? Because one thing that I don't think it means is doing everything for your wife at home, because there's roles and we all have our own roles. I do not expect my wife to be mowing the lawn or fixing a drywall that my dog chew completely. I don't expect my wife to change the oil on my truck, right? I don't expect my wife to be on the roof. So there's some roles, right, that we need to play, and we need to make sure that those roles stay as God ordained. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to wash the dishes once. I mean, sometimes for me, being in front of a computer all day, I will go down and I'll just cook some breakfast and just wash my dishes. It's good for my brain. It's just relaxing sometimes. But these things can go a little bit to the edge if it's not explained properly. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think my take is, well, first of all, obviously, I'm just going to state the obvious, is that some of those things that you mentioned that are considered in the male domain, some women are gifted in those areas too. I mean, they are. Some women know better how to change a oil in a car than the man. So those are not specifically, those are just generalities that you've mentioned, but so they can go really back and forth. They can, but what's important is that, and I do it in premarital counseling, is that roles are defined. What do I expect you to do? What do you expect me to do? And get that well defined early on. So, for instance, for me, again, standard setter, I have always believed that the first part of discipline is making your bed every day. And so that was my standard. Yes. That's just the way it had to be. And so what we came up with.
Who made the bed? Who made the bed?
Well, that's what I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you. So what we came up with is the last person out of the bed was the one who made the bed. And so sometimes that's been me, sometimes that's been her, mostly more her because I get up a lot earlier. Mm-hmm. But over our lifetime, I mean, we have both made the bed, and I don't mind. So let's say she gets up and for whatever reason I'm having her quiet time or whatever, and she doesn't have a chance, and I'm back there, I'll do it. I don't care. I mean, this is a rule that I mean, it's a rule that we have, but there's flexibility there too, and so I'm happy to serve her that way. And I will say that because you mentioned dishes, I would say there's a book, and I'm trying to remember the name, but there was a book that said the title was something like love making starts in the kitchen. And what the premise was is that if you serve your wife, if you wash the dishes for her, if you do things to help her, it just helps the relationship. And so I mean, for the last few years, maybe more than few, I've been the primary dishwasher. I don't care. I serve her, and she feels served. She feels loved. She feels cared for, and that just helps our relationship. So I don't mind doing those things at all. But again, I think those things, what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, all need to be defined beforehand. And the truth is, my wife's much better at keeping the house than I am. She is. I mean, I don't know if it's just her nature or whatever. So, but I help her wherever I can. And no, she doesn't get out and mow the yard and all that stuff. But she has at times, like when I was gone in the Army, she was out mowing yard, because I wasn't there to do it. So it's it's a blessing to serve and to care. And I think when you look at marriage and parenting, to me, what God teaches us in both of those is to be selfless.
Right.
That it's not about us. It's not about what we want. So we have to learn to give up ourselves and serve our wife. We got to give up ourselves and serve our kids, take care of them, and help them grow up. All those things are not easy to do. And like there'll be times where, okay, man, I don't want to, I know that my wife has been up every night, every night taking care of the baby, and I just don't want to get up because I got to go to work. But sometimes you got to be there. Sometimes she got to get the rest too. So I'm just saying there is a give and take in marriage, and there are seasons in marriage. But I think that what we have to learn to do is that we serve our wife, and our wife serves us. That's kind of the way that God has designed it. And then it's the same with kids. We serve our kids. We teach them to serve. We teach them that we're there for them. And then they learn that's what we're supposed to do. And I mean, that's what you do as a Christ follower. Other people are supposed to be more important than you.
Yes.
And love others as you love yourself. And so that's what we're teaching them as we serve them and we serve their mother.
John, tell me a little bit about your son, your relationship with him, as you were raising him, your relationship with him right now, as in his mid-30s, right? What's your relationship with him right now? And I mean, is there anything that you think you failed and you have recovered in your relationship with him through the years, and how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think he would probably be much better to answer where I failed. I'm not sure. I'm sure that there have been areas that I did fail in, because there's a father wound in everybody, and so there were things that I didn't do. But where I really focused on my son is that I wanted to teach him again how to be a man, how to not depend on me but depend on God, and so I did things with him that were manly. We would go. I was involved in scouts with him, camping and all those kind of things. I would help that. And there was a time when he was a young teen where we lived in Barbados in the Eastern Caribbean. I was there as a military assignment. I was assigned at the U.S. Embassy there, and so I was already certified in diving. So as a 14-year-old, he got certified, and we would go diving at least once a month together. And that was our father-son time. We would both come back just really energized by spending that time, but by getting to do that together. So I think that there were times that I challenged him. We've always been one father-son who have talked a lot. I remember, I mean, we talk about everything, and so even when it came time to get married, he came and asked me, my opinion on his wife, because we just had that relationship of being able to talk. Wow. Well, future wife, but yeah, and so it was just normal, and we still talk the same way now. Obviously it's a little harder. He's got smaller kids, right. And so when we talked that they're running around there. But my son is also in the military. He's a major in the Army, and he just got back from Kuwait. He was there for almost a year, and so he's having to go through the same things that I had to go through. You're gone, you're deployed, but you got to come back and then reintegrate into the home. But we talk all the time. I mean, and speaking about talking, let me just talk for a minute about what we did in raising our kids. One of the things that we did is that every night dinner was a requirement. We sat down and ate dinner together. And what happened over the years is that we talked about everything. It became normal. Our kids were used to talking to adults because they talked to us every night.
Yeah.
And on every topic, from politics to sex to whatever, it was all open. We could all talk about it. But now that has led to, we have that same relationship now with each one of them, is that they can talk to us, we talk to them. When we all come together, which is not very often because everyone's scattered, but when we do, I mean, dinner times are so important because everybody, them and their spouses, we just sit for hours and just talk.
Yes.
And it's a blessing. So, yeah. So that was set as a standard that we're going to do that at dinner. We're gonna eat together, and as we eat together, then we listen to what's going on in each other's lives.
Yeah.
And
what a beautiful picture.
It did. It made raising them so much easier because even if you have a conflict at home, sitting down, you're going to talk.
Yeah.
You're going to talk at dinner time.
Yeah, and
so we did that. We were kind of countercultural in that way because a lot of families don't eat together.
And we have to be, right? And I think that's something that we have to put in the work. Because guess what? It's going to take work. Man, it takes so much work to be so intentional about where you want your legacy to be. Because we're not thinking, we tend to want to think tomorrow, the next week, the next month, the next 6 months. But everything that you're saying right now, it's generational legacy. You're putting the work for what's going to happen when your kids marry and have their own children. That's where you're going to see the fruits. And if they repeat that you guys exampled back at home, it will be a generational blessing that now they have
generational impact
because you guys put in the work, and it takes a lot of work. See, people think that is easy. It ain't easy. It's not easy. Sometimes you gotta be present when you don't feel like being present. When you're tired, you don't want to answer the question. I'm like, gosh, are you gonna ask me this question now? I just sat down. I mean, it takes a lot of work. And I think back to self-awareness. We need to be self-aware of what's going on around us and the legacy that we want to leave behind, because that's the only thing that we're going to be remembered for. I remember the story of a guy said he was in somebody, at his grandma's house, and there were so many people gather for Thanksgiving, all their sons and daughters and their nephews and their husbands of the daughters and the fathers, etc., kids, grandkids. We're talking about 40, 50 people in the house, and everybody was talking about how everything started with this lady and these gentlemen, how they pour into their family, right? Nobody's talking about their profession. Nobody's talking about what they did for a living, what college did they go to. It was all about that legacy, that family, right? How do you raise these kids? And look where we are right now because of those faithful parents. So
I think of my wife. Her grandfather was a pastor. He was also the head of a denomination, and he had an incredible godly impact on his family. And I believe that even now that impact is being felt because he again set the loving standard as a Christ follower. His kids came to know Christ, and many of their kids did. And he it's true. It really does say that we'll impact generations. and he did impact. And so my hope, when you talk about legacy, my hope is that, 100 years from now, someone will be talking about me the same way, that, okay, he impacted the world, he impacted our family with the gospel, and it made a difference. And so that's really what I hope. One of the things that you mentioned just kind of stuck in my mind is that really our job really is to train and prepare our kid for the future, for life. The proverb says to train a child in the way that he should go, and then when he's old, he won't depart from it. And so, I mean, as a parent, what do we train our kids in? Well, I think Proverbs, if you want to know what to do, look at Proverbs. There's so much wisdom in there. But you see Proverbs teaches that we got to teach them how to manage God's money.
Yes.
We got to teach them how to carefully select friends. We got to teach them how to watch their words. And these are all from Proverbs. We teach them to be responsible, teach them to guard their minds, teach them to be generous, teach them to fear God. But all those are found in Proverbs. This is something that you should do as a normal part. You want to raise your kid? Man, get in and learn those things. Here's what the scriptures say I ought to be doing to train my kid so that they will go in that way, and then one day continue to do that. Because I'm sure you've met them too. There's parents who have said that have followed Jesus. They love Jesus,
but they're not.
But
They're
their
not,
kids
they're
did
not telling that to their kids. They're not being an example.
And the kids see that, and so they fall away. Counterculturally on the same idea. I for years I have had my quiet time, my devotional time with the Lord in the morning, every day in the same place. And it's in our living room, in a chair in our living room, and I'm always there. I take time to read scripture and talk to God. But that had an impact on my kids, because my son has said to me, Dad, I would see you in that seat every day, and it really made a difference in my life. I knew that's the standard.
Yeah.
I got to be.
It's impactful
before God,
and I think that sometimes we don't think about it. I will say people are always watching. If you consider yourself to be professing yourself to be a Christ follower, everybody's always watching. Everybody, your kids are always watching how you behave at church. How do you posture yourself? If you serve, it's even a greater thing. And I'm not saying this just to say, that you have to put a facade or anything, right? But you have to have the posture of Christ. You are a representative of His truth, His love, His grace. And we can quickly, if we don't pay attention, I think we can quickly be hindering somebody else's faith because the way we behave, right? It's like, well, this guy is professing something, but is acting like the world. Where's the standard here? Where's the division? Where's that black and white difference?
And kids see it. Kids see that. If they see a different dad at home than at church, they see it, and that will turn them on to the gospel.
And they call it so quickly too.
Yeah. I've seen pastors where their kids have fallen away because they weren't consistent at home. Their public life was different than their private life, and that has an incredible impact on kids on where they're following. But on your idea that everybody is watching, that's really true. I was told once by a neighbor that who walked every morning and would walk by my front window. That she saw me every morning sitting in my chair and have my quiet time. And so it's the same thing. You're impacting your kids, but you're also impacting your community. So people are watching all the time. You're right. And we have to be consistent, both at home as we are in public.
Yeah, I know. It's mind blowing to know that. So, and we don't pay attention to that. John, you have impacted our family for generations, I will say, and we're very grateful and we honor you and we love you dearly, you and your family. In closing, what can we do to get better at being a dad? If there is a couple of sentences, and you probably have mentioned this in this chat before, but in a couple of sentences, if there's one thing that you could say to those who are listening this episode, what can we do to get better at being a dad?
Yeah, I think first you got to be there, and I mean it's okay if you have work and you've got to go. There are times that happens, but when you're home, you've got to be there, and they got to know that. And then I think as a dad, knowing that you're the standard keeper in the home, that you work hard to teach your children all the things that we talked about, but so that they learn to not depend on you and not depend on friends and not depend on themselves, but depend on God. And I mean, that is the ultimate goal. You can't lose sight of that. That's the vision, is that I want my adult child following Jesus. That's really what I want. I want them living for him. And so I have to gradually teach them how to do that. It is a process, and not easy, not at all easy, but it requires focus and always looking at the end result. My child, as an adult, following Jesus, and them then teaching their kids to do the same. And it's thrilling to watch. That you mentioned I was a grandfather 10, just to watch my children raise their kids to be godly kids. It's such a blessing to me. It really does. So I'd say, yeah, be there and never lose sight of the goal. We've got to teach them to depend on God.
Amen. Thank you for coming into the podcast, Pastor John. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you then soon. Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And if this content is helpful to you, would you consider rating this episode and subscribe to the podcast? This episode was sponsored by Cyricom Tech, your virtual IT department. Cyricom Tech provides cybersecurity services, cloud services, IT support, infrastructure build, phone systems integrations, and much more. With more than 25 years of experience in the enterprise, Cyricom Tech is here to serve you. You can book a free consultation by calling 720-819-7388. Also on the web at cyricomtech.com. That is SIRECOM tech.com. Until the next episode, God bless you.